Well, it seems like Netflix Avatar did the exact thing I said they needed to not do. I never in my life imagined that you could take one of the greatest pieces of media of all time and over the course of 63 long, grueling minutes, utterly destroy everything that I liked from my childhood. What it comes down to is frantic pacing and not showing us the things we need to actually fall in love and have a connection with these characters, which is weird considering you had 63 minutes to do so. But bad pacing alone isn't enough to tear down one of my favorite childhood shows into something that makes me literally throw up in my mouth and curl my toes in disgust every time I hear this little fucking bean-headed kid say responsibility, like he's got a marshmallow denser than Appa's back fat crammed down his windpipe. The main problem is how uncomfortable the main actor is with just being on camera. He's an old man in a little baby body. He gives up this very robotic performance, and it's almost alien. I feel like he has Zuckerberg syndrome where he's still trying to figure out how to be human, and it doesn't at all capture the pure childishness and carefreeness of Aang. It makes the show borderline unbearable. He doesn't know how to let loose and actually show some personality. You could have shaved any kid's head bald, and he would have looked just like Aang. There's nothing that makes this guy specifically anything special. It's so bad that the kid doesn't even know how to explain what he likes doing, like an actual kid would. He reads lines so dead and robotic, it's like he can't even pretend to like playing with his friends. But it's not just the actors that make the characters unbelievable. The writing and the pacing is some of the worst I think I've ever seen in any piece of media, ever. Even Aang's origin story is ruined by the fact that there are so many scenes left out. The entire reason for Aang leaving the temple in the first place and getting caught in the iceberg is because he's scared of what his life is going to become now that he's found out that he's the Avatar. And we get this scene where he says that he doesn't want to be alone and that he just wants to be accepted by people. But the thing is, we never see him experience any kind of rejection or isolation as a result of being the Avatar. Nobody's been mistreating you yet. We haven't seen a single instance of anybody treating you like an outcast. And it sets up Aang as this kind of whiny, for absolutely no reason, annoying kid. Honestly, it just seems like they got Aang's character completely wrong. On one hand, you have this kid that goes out of his way to stand out. He evades lessons and he acts in a way that very clearly separates him from the rest of his peers. And he's not doing it because it's fun. He's doing it to be cringe. All of these things point to him wanting to be different and wanting to portray himself like this, but then he goes on to say that he wants to blend in and that he wants to be just like everybody else. Even though he's going out of his way to be this little monk icon, it's completely contradictory, and it sets up Aang as this kind of pretentious, self-obsessed character that wants to be cool. Whereas the real Aang, I feel like, just got caught up in being retarded. There was no element of him bragging about how good he was at everything. This kid is. If anything, Aang hated the fact that he stood out compared to everybody else. The original show showed off Aang being goofy and carefree and like making the airball and throwing the cakes at the other kids' heads. Instead of seeing any of that, he basically gives an argument for why the things he does make him a child and why he isn't ready to be the Avatar. The writing and the dialogue is just so poor, and that's on top of the acting. You have no idea whether or not being the Avatar will even isolate you or not. At this point, you just found out that you had a fucking superpower, bruh. And you didn't even hear any of the bad shit that comes with it. But you're still bugging out. You should be hype as fuck. Netflix did say that they wanted this to be their Game of Thrones, but I didn't think they meant that they'd go out of their way to make a rated R Avatar The Last Airbender. I feel like the show is so unnecessarily gruesome at some moments. A guy literally gets burnt to death in the first 5 minutes of the show. It's so unnecessary and thrown on for the sake of being grown up. Instead of trying to tackle the story with more nuanced and mature storytelling, they went the most superficial route possible, instead of trying to write a darker story. Gratuitous violence is not darkness, it's not immaturity, it's the exact opposite. And I thought what we were getting was a grown-up Avatar. You're either gonna remake the kid show, or grow the show up the right way. But you cut right down the middle and gave us this childish version of what being a grown-up means. There were parts where I literally felt like I was watching Mortal Kombat the movie. The over-the-top costumes, the wackiness. Why does Gyatso get into a beam struggle with Sozin? I feel like there aren't any intentional jokes for the entire first episode. The only things that made me laugh or smile were things that were so bad that I found them funny. At a certain point, I even thought it was being self-aware and making fun at how goofy some of the concepts are in the show. I can't help but think that some of the things are intentionally bad. When Gran first comes in, everything about this scene is so stupid. The way everything looks, the way she sounds delivering her lines, the fact that she had to examine his hands to realize he's an airbender even though he has a fucking blue arrow on his head. Oh, I realize now. It's so stupid. Iroh isn't wise. He's like a queerer Neil deGrasse Tyson. Why is his first line that long-ass scientific explanation? I feel like they just get all of the characters wrong. Besides Sokka, honestly, I feel like he's the only good part of the show. There's no way in fuck that this show isn't a completely self-aware parody. I think somebody on the production team has to be a professional hater. This picture of Ozai? What art style is this? It's literally a fucking AI painting. This looks like what you'd get if you told ChatGPT to make you something based on Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it couldn't use the actual art style because it's copyrighted material. The Fire Lord will not be pleased, and it's a fucking AI painting. These shows make no sense if you're not already watching it from the perspective of somebody that knows the original show. But the thing is, like, why would a fan want such a bare bones summary? The show isn't long enough to warrant that. This isn't One Piece that has 3 billion episodes and takes 10 years to watch. They don't show you the characters experiencing any of these things at all. It just jumps between major character transition moments. You never get to exist with the characters in this state, and it makes all of them seem bipolar. Everybody is just so easily influenced, and they have complete 180s in what they believe in and what they'll fight for. Over and over and over, like 3 times per episode. The characters we get have no resolve, even when it comes to things that should be at the core of their very being and personalities. The ideas and beliefs that represent them as people. All of it means nothing, and we just see these characters flip-flop around these completely opposing ideologies. Like they aren't literally adopting an entirely new lifestyle. Major character developments like Zuko going from this really bad guy with 11 layers of pink eye makeup on into this nice sweet young man with a nice haircut will make no sense in this show. We won't get to see all the little things build and build up and push the characters to realistically evolve into something that's completely different. Instead of gradual and reasonable character building throughout the series, we get this weird wishy-washiness and characters that are so unbelievable and unlikable because none of the things that they do make any sense within the context of the show. It's also underdeveloped. And as if the bad writing wasn't awful enough on its own, the way the actors portray some of the tougher scenes in the show is just so immersion breaking and outright laughable. The Avatar state is super fucking cringe in this. In the original series, whenever Aang tapped into this mode, it really felt like things became unpredictable and almost scary because of how utterly out of control his personality and actions were. This kid cannot effectively convey the extreme emotions that make this state believable. There's never any real sense of extreme grief or sadness or anger that completely pushes him over the edge and into this blank, frenzied state. So instead of having this believable sense of heightened emotion, you just have this weird little twink bald kid flexing over and over, trying to look intimidating. But he doesn't really understand the depth of the emotions that he's trying to portray. That means that any of these super intense climactic moments are always going to be cringe because it's a kid trying his damnedest to show something his little baby boy brain has no concept of. Even when he's talking to Gyatso in his head and he's trying to come to grips with the fact that he's gone, you never really get a sense of real sadness or grief. He's kind of just making weird squish faces for no reason. The actors can't accurately portray any of the emotions that they're supposed to be feeling, and because of that, it makes the already bad character writing that much more of a joke. The main character here hardly has any acting experience or talent for acting. Why would you make him the main character? This kid has social anxiety. He's afraid to talk in front of the class. Why the fuck did you put him in front of the camera? And the absolute worst part of all of it is that even if this kid could act, even if he wasn't pulled from those Disney Channel hotel lobby auditions, he still wouldn't have been anywhere close to the Aang we're used to because what they wrote is so shit. In my previous video, which you should check out, I talked about how the character development and writing was a standout feature that made Avatar something special, and how the creators use a unique sense of humor in each of the characters in order to really flesh them out and make something believable and realistic. Even if the actor can't accurately portray this, you should have the essence of what made these characters lovable in the first place. But the things that they wrote for this little bald retard to say don't come off right at all. There's a scene in the 3rd episode where Aang is like, "The monks always told me that I should never be a teacher because I never listen." Actually, I think that's what they said, because I never listen. It's said so matter-of-factly and just obnoxious. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't convey Aang. There's no fun behind him, and in this case, it's not even the actor's fault. They turn Aang into the most insufferable, snot-nosed little brat, and it by no means makes me want to stick with the show. If only Aang being a bald young Sheldon variant was the end of the bad writing. I don't buy any of the characters here. I don't believe that any one of them believes that they are the ones that need to save the world. When you watch the original series, you can reasonably believe how Katara is so adamant about wanting to go on this quest to save the world. Because even though it's just the beginning of their journey, they've most definitely gone through a lot. They've been fucking traumatized, their village was almost destroyed. They travel across the entire country on this stinky bison that's been frozen in ice for 100 years, with this little bald kid that probably smells just as bad. They have a transformative experience, and you fully see that. So based on what we see, it makes sense for some of these characters to be all in on this idea of saving the world and on this grand journey. I can understand how you would feel that the responsibility's fallen onto you. In the case of the live action though, you're seeing everything happen so fast that it just becomes unbelievable that somebody would throw their life away for this greater purpose, when we haven't seen enough to reasonably believe that you believe you have a greater purpose. You guys didn't even really save him. You got him out the berg, some firebenders came, beat up Sokka a little bit, but like there was no real threat. Aang resolved that shit right away. They went away, and when you go to fucking rescue the guy, 2 minutes after this guy walks away, you don't even act like you're leaving home. You guys just kind of get out of there real quick. Like, say goodbye to your grandmother, dude. And when you go to rescue him, you don't even experience any kind of trouble or like fight. You just do a flyby and coincidentally grab him while he's falling. And you guys get the fuck out of there. And 30 seconds later, you're at the Southern Air Temple. We're not traveling with these characters and experiencing with them. So we can't fully believe that they really think that they're on this mission. There's no sense of responsibility. We haven't experienced anything that makes us feel like we're all in this together. We're still just strangers, and you don't have like this developed relationship between the characters that makes you believe that they fully trust in each other. Like, are you really telling me you're not going to tell this guy to spin you back to your crib just because you hit a nice mid-air dap? We're just breezing through all the events of the show. And that never lets the weight sit on you and feel heavy and feel like this actually matters. And now that I've thoroughly shit on the show for the past 12 minutes, you must be thinking, they've done absolutely nothing right in this entire series, or at least the first few episodes. And it blows my mind even more to say that that's not true. I really enjoyed the way that they focused in on Suki, a character who I personally don't believe got enough development in the original series. They focus in on making her a real character, and you really get the sense of Suki being this conflicted girl who has responsibility, but who has this desire to see the outside world and something other than the order and discipline that she's been raised in, as good as she may be at it, and also in showing this character who's extremely capable and confident in her ability, but when it comes to this completely foreign side of things, is completely lost and clueless. She thought she was impressing him when they fought. She thinks that putting this little cocky, self-obsessed Goobatron in a rear naked choke is gonna make him fall in love with her. But all it does is make him feel like a twink, and unfortunately, he's not into it. But she doesn't get how that isn't cool as fuck, because all she's ever known is fighting and training and how to be a warrior. And she's never had the chance to just be a girl. And it's so much more fleshed out. You don't really notice that in the original series. And it's not just because I was too young and because I was retarded. She never really got the screen time or the emotional exploration to show these deeper, more complex things. Instead, we got a prissy sorority girl trying to impress her friends, who finally comes to terms with the fact that she has a crush at the end of the episode. We take this character who's completely sidelined and who was kind of inconsequential to the overall plot, and you develop them so much more and make them a real person. A lot like Final Fantasy VII ended up doing with Jessie. But it's weird because you're not focusing on the main characters and developing them emotionally in this way. And it's nice because we're seeing a completely different side of things this time around. But you need to do both, especially if this is supposed to be a remake that stands on its own. In the original FF7, Jessie is literally nobody. All she is this extra that you do the first mission with. And aside from that, she's not a character. And the new game fleshes her out so much more, creates emotional attachment, and creates real character behind her. But they don't sacrifice the other characters to do so. And I think that timing, and pacing is the issue here. Because if you had more time, then you can explore these things more and the depth of these characters that we didn't get enough of before, while also still developing our mains. But we don't have enough time to do it all, and we end up with this ununderstandable, bipolar main crew. These attentively cared for side characters that are going to be in the show for 1, at most 2 episodes. And it just blows my mind because it shows that they can actually write. They can actually convey these deeper things on screen. It's not like they're bad. They can get the message across and they can make you feel attached and make you feel like these are real people. The writers are capable of doing so, and they're just failing to because of the time constraints here. When we take a look back at Aang, there are so many things about his character that we never see. We never get any kind of justification for these statements, and because of that, we never believe these parts of his character that are supposed to be so integral. The way he says it, when it's said, and what we've seen about him before it was said, does not at all convey the things we're being told. If show don't tell is one of the most key concepts in storytelling, then this show has all of the finesse of a toothpick inside of a Skyrim master lock. And again, it doesn't help that his acting is so fucking bad. There's this scene where he tells us that he doesn't want to hurt anybody, and that he doesn't want to fight, but that he also feels like a reject and that he doesn't fit in among his peers. All in the same breath. We're getting blindsided by these character traits. They're coming out of nowhere and you never get a chance to see it. All of the things that are supposed to make up his character are completely without any backing. And it just makes everything so weird, because how are we supposed to know that? How do we know that he's not just talking out of his ass? How do we believe that this is who he is? Was there no other way to do this except him explicitly telling us it? If you guys had added one more episode to this season, there probably would have been more than enough time to explore all these avenues and angles, instead of us just getting this shitty exposition dump, instead of him telling us that he likes to play airball and eat banana cake. Like, would it have been that hard to just show us? We get this unconvincing monologue where he just wears this shit-eating grin on his face. And I do not believe for a minute that this is a real kid. That's not how you create character, or at least one that we like and relate to. With Suki, they created character without the words. We see it develop within her action and her reactions when she has her moments. We don't need her to say, "I don't know how to be a girl. How do I flirt?" She doesn't say that shit, but it's conveyed fully through her actions and through the subtlety of her acting. There are so many little quips that build her personality, down to her touching Sokka's arm to correct him. It's such a subtle way of showing that she does really hold this mentor position, and that she's very familiar with instructing people and being a step above them and having to teach them things. These little things go so far in characterizing her and making us buy that she is what she says she is. And it's so interesting how much attention they paid to this side character, but it makes me feel even worse about how glossed over the main story is. We're really able to see this softness alongside her pride, and it makes her a very palatable character because we're able to understand that despite definitely being better than pretty much anyone she's ever known, there's no malice behind it. At the end of the day, she's just this girl that can do some pretty cool tricks. You were able to fully get across this complex personal identity. They do a perfect job at making sure that we don't misinterpret what's there, when it would have been so easy to just make her a bitch. It shows that when they were producing this show, they weren't misinterpreting these things. They have people that really understand the core of this show and of the characters, and they're capable of displaying that on screen too. And somehow, some way, we still got young Sheldon. Why do we not get it where it counts the most? If you ask me, these characters aren't even particularly complex. When we get deeper into the series, and we see real internal character conflict with people like Zuko, are you gonna be able to capture all of the sadness, the regret over a wasted life, and this tearing at the seams over the person that he once was? If you couldn't get it right for this guy that's just supposed to be baby mode all the time, then what chance do you have at capturing something that's actually supposed to be pivotal, complicated, and real? As of right now, I've only watched the first 3 episodes of the show. I wanted to do an entire review on the series as a whole, but I didn't expect to have this much to say about just the beginning. If you enjoyed listening to me rant, please subscribe. I'll be combing over every single part of this awful remake, and also be talking about lots more things that I'm interested in. Thank you for making it to the end, or skipping if you got bored. Either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.